Hey, I'm Tyler Odell. I live in Norwich and I'm a junior at Hanover High School. I've done a few summits of Mount Washington. Um, I've summited every other mountain in the presidential range, a few of them multiple times, and I've summited stuff in Vermont like Killington and Camel's Hump.
I think it started probably 3 or 4 years ago. We had gone to the climbing gym over in Queechee, and actually it was Eamon's interest at first. So his brother Eamon was interested in climbing first. Tyler went along initially, and then just somewhere in that time span, it sort of flipped, and Tyler sort of had a greater interest in it than Eamon did, and it sort of just continued since then, really.
And so I started with hiking, um, and then just you know, what next could I do outdoors that would be like cooler and more like impressive. And so climbing was, just steeper and like more risk, and you needed more gear for it, so it just seemed like a lot more fun than it was.
He never was much of a hiker that I remember. As a matter of fact, when they were little, we used to try to go on family hikes, and always both of them, both Tyler and his brother Eamon, would complain miserably and say, I hate hikes, I hate going on hikes. But then every time we got there, of course, they stopped complaining and they obviously enjoyed it.
Well, I started off climbing in the gym. That was around the gym at Queechee, and then they closed. And I took it outside. I've climbed at Deer's Leap a bunch, which is a cliff in Killington. Um, with a bunch of different routes on it. I've climbed at a place called Rumney in New Hampshire, which is like a world famous climbing spot. There's thousands of routes there, like for all difficulty levels. And that's a lot of the rock climbing stuff. And then I've climbed on Mount Washington, climbed up Tuckerman's a few times. I've skied down that quite recently. So yeah, just a few places up here, mostly just Vermont and New Hampshire. On Deer's Leap, you're just above Route 4. And so it's still a very cool climb, but you could just look down and like see cars and parking lots. Whereas on Washington, the hike in to start climbing up Tuckerman's, depending on how much weight you're carrying, can be like a 2 hour, 2.5 hour hike anyway. Um, if you're carrying a bunch of weight. And so by the time you get to the bottom of it, like you're completely out there. Like, I think it's about 2.5 miles to even get to the start of it. And I say for that reason alone, Washington is my favorite just because it's definitely the biggest. And then if you continue on to the summit, which I've done, it's like a few hours after that even. So it's like a full day thing. The main reason that Washington's dangerous is because of the weather. It is the worst weather in the world. The highest wind speeds ever recorded. It was like 232 miles an hour. And so it's not a super high mountain. It's only like 6,000 footer, but the wind speeds and like the super sudden change in the weather. So most people just underestimate it. So if you're prepared, it's not like overly dangerous. It still can be with like the weather shifting, but most people just show up in like flip flops or Crocs and just try and do it on like a summer day, and then next thing they know, it's negative 20 degrees at the top, and they're like completely unprepared.
It's hard because um, we know it's dangerous, and I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little naive. Maybe it's probably more dangerous than I think it is, especially for the climbs and the hikes that he's doing in the winter, because those conditions, especially up in the Whites, can change pretty quickly, and it can be pretty intense. Um, I've always told him, both kids, I think, since they were very little, to make good decisions, and You know, I think for the most part he's done that.
It's definitely, most of the time when he goes to the whites is when I get a little nervous. Um, I know how dangerous it is, the weather, you can be prepared, but sometimes the weather is just too unpredictable, the elements are too bad. Um, and so it's a lot of like me being nervous, but me not trying to tell him not to go, because I know he has to do what he has to do. So it's a lot of call me before you leave, keep me posted. Don't worry about texting me, but text me when you can, so I know that you're not, dead.
Early on, when it looked like this was really going to sort of catch on with him, we bought a GPS tracker. So at least I would know where his location was, and if he ever got in trouble, it's got an SOS button on it, so he can press that button. It'll send signals out to Garmin, and they will alert then the people in the local area that there's somebody who's having an issue and needs help. So that was big for me, because it was one thing to be able to say, sure, go off to the whites, go on hiking, but it was just a sense of comfort for us to know we would know where he was.
I started off with more rock climbing stuff. And so originally we were just doing like top roping stuff, which is when you put the rope above you so that if you fall, the rope will just catch you immediately. And there's, as far as climbing goes outside, that's the one that I'd say has the least amount of risk attached to it. And then we moved on to leading, which is when you have the rope attached to you, and as you climb up the wall, you clip the rope into protection that you've placed. So if you fall, you'll fall. The rope will catch you, and you'll fall like however long it is until it stops you where you clipped it in last. And so that has a lot more risk in it, because if you could take like a 30-foot fall on that, and it'd just be a 30-foot free fall before the rope catches you again. So if you're like, there have been times that I was maybe 10 feet up and I fell and I just hit the ground because I didn't have enough space between me and the ground in order for the rope to catch me like yet. And so you have to be much more mindful of what you're doing when you're leading as opposed to top roping, because any risk that you take is going to have higher consequences if it doesn't pay off. Then I moved to like more alpine style climbing. So that was when I started going up to Washington more, like super cold weather climbing, not so high angle. So it wasn't like sheer vertical. It was more like I didn't use a rope for most of it because it's not worth all the extra weight. And that's when I had crampons. I got my ice axe. We would rope up occasionally just to, if somebody started falling, to try and stop their fall sooner. But for the most part, that was just like a different style of climbing entirely, because it was cold out, as opposed to when you rock climb, it's not very cold out, or you don't want it to be insanely cold out. And so it was just a much different feeling from rock climbing, but it was still a good feeling. Like, I still enjoyed it very much. In most cases, we'll have planned to climb like maybe like a week in advance, because we usually do them on the weekends. Usually on a Sunday. We might drive up on a Saturday if we're doing one in like Washington, because it's like a 2-hour drive. But usually we get all the gear, or I get all my gear ready the night before.
We are going to go climbing, and I'm going to get all the gear that we need to go climbing together.
I'd say definitely the challenge and definitely the danger are both two very big things. One thing I really like about rock climbing is that there's always something harder. So if you're working on, they're usually, we call them projects. If a project is just a climb that you're working on for a really long time. And so if you have, say you have a project and you're keep trying that, and you go back day after day after day and just keep trying and trying and trying, and like it's like all consuming, and that's the only thing that you want to climb, which is like sometimes how I get, because I'll just get so determined on something that I don't want to really do much else, and I just want to keep going after it. And then you finally complete it, and then maybe even the same day you'll move on to something even harder, and then that'll become your new project, and it'll just keep going through that process and just repeat and repeat and repeat. And you could literally do that forever because there's always something harder. And so that's definitely a very big appeal of it.
Tyler's definitely very motivated. When he wants to do something, he puts all of his effort into it. The winter traverse is something he wanted to do so badly since he did the summer traverse. And he got all the gear, spent all the money, made all the plans, and he went up and he did it. And his climbing partner, his brother, tore his suit the night before, and so they couldn't do it. And then later, his brother told him that he didn't actually want to do it. And so then Tyler was kind of in this spot of like, what do I do? Where do I go? How can I make this happen? And he connected to all the people he knew. He tried his best to find a climbing partner, and finally he found someone who would do it with him. This person, unfortunately, didn't have all the skills to do the full traverse, and so they went up, they tried to do half of it, but he definitely gave his all to trying to complete that project, and I think he'll be able to do it next year.
I'm Ethan. I live in Norwich. I go to Hanover. I'm a junior, and I got into climbing through Tyler and the Mountaineering Club at Hanover.
It was Skylar's idea, and she said like we should start a club or something, and I thought that was a very good idea because I had sort of been like thinking about it. I'd thought about it a few times, but never like seriously. But then I figured like it's not hard to start a club at school, and even if we weren't able to get any funding, I still have plenty of gear and people could rent stuff, so it would still like work out. And I didn't think that people would join as fast as they did, but I was just, because I think I was talking about just doing a climb one day in English class, and then one of the kids sitting next to me like thought it sounded interesting, and so he joined and then brought a bunch of his friends with him.
We've done ice climbing at a quarry in Grantham, and then we went to the Deer's Leap in Killington.
It was a bit hard for a lot of people. I think the thing was it looks really easy until you actually start trying it, and then you realize like, wow, this is actually kind of hard to do.
Tyler interacts very well. He treats it like he's a guide, and he helps teach people when needed, and if they know what they're doing, he lets them do what they know how to do.
Yeah, so I have a lot of plans that I'd like to act on. Some are pretty ambitious, some are probably pretty doable, but I figure that's probably a good thing. I want to, well, as far as a big hiking goal, so this isn't climbing, but as a big hiking goal, this summer, Skylar and I are gonna do the Long Trail in Vermont, which goes from the border of Massachusetts to the border of Canada, which is just a super big backpacking trip, all throughout Vermont. And then for more climbing stuff, I just want to do as much rock climbing as I can this summer, because the summer's obviously, you're not going to be able to do any ice climbing or anything, so I just want to go to different places and get as much rock climbing in as possible.
I've seen the focus, right? To be able to take an activity and to sort of go all in on it and have total focus on something and execute. And I think I've seen that change as he's gotten a little bit older, as he's matured a little bit. And I also think that he's planning the trips so that he's doing the work up front to know what to expect, to know what route he's going to take, and to make sure that he's doing the right thing to be safe on the mountain and with climbing.
He's definitely gotten more and more passionate about it. He sort of thinks he's like climbing all the time is what's on his mind. And I think it's certainly helped him be more confident, and he likes to challenge himself. I think that's why he loves it so much, because that's what he does. He likes to figure out like a challenge, something he can do that maybe nobody else is doing, and that's, I think, what attracts him to it.
I love the competition with yourself. I have done group sports. I play lacrosse, and you know, there's an aspect of club or school organized sports where, you know, you're playing against a team and you have to beat the other team. But in climbing, it's just you beating yourself and you trying to improve yourself. And that's really why I love climbing so much, because it's not about anyone else, it's just about yourself.
Tyler has definitely found his purpose over the past few years as he developed his skills in climbing due to the fact that it takes up basically all of his time these days.
So climbing has impacted my life in some big ways. I definitely feel like I've found one of the things that I'm good at. I used to try, I've tried like every sport there is. Not actually, but a lot. I've tried like soccer, football, hockey, basketball. I've tried a bunch of stuff and I just didn't like any of them very much. A lot of them like back in elementary school and stuff like that. And then I started climbing and it was just so much more fun. And it's hard, and sometimes it's not as pleasant as other times, like when you're cold or tired or hungry or whatever it may be. But you always feel like such a sense of accomplishment after you do a super big climb. And I just don't really get that feeling with anything else that I do.
It's definitely brought me closer to the outdoors. I used to go hiking from time to time, but I never really spent that much time outside. But now, almost every weekend, me and Tyler are like, let's go outside, let's go and do something. And it's definitely, I think it's made me overall just happier and more appreciative of nature and the outdoors.
I love getting outside and exploring with Tyler and the club wherever he takes me. So I've always loved hiking, but just these past 2 years I've gotten more into climbing through Tyler.
And it's very relaxing too a lot of the time. So like if I have something on my mind or whatever it might be, or I'm just not having like a very good day, if I go climbing, like that all sort of just leaves my mind, and I don't really think about anything until I'm off the wall really, because it's a good feeling of being just so focused in on something that everything else kind of leaves your mind for that time being, because you don't want to fall, you don't want to make a mistake, even if you're indoor climbing, even though if you fall indoors, nothing's going to happen. But you just want to get to the top without falling, and so you're just so focused in on that you just don't think about anything else while you're doing it. And that's just a very good feeling for me.